Another Instagram live for you. Hope everyone's well. Looking forward to this one. Good long-term industry friend of ours is going to be joining us shortly, IAN FRASER from TXG in Canada. So we've known Ian a long time, and it's going to be really good fun chewing the cud over various things with him. Hope everyone's staying safe and well. We had a few questions in preceding this so far, so going to drop those in. But any questions anyone's got whilst we go through, just fire them over, and I'll do my best to cover all of them. We'll do our best to get as many of the questions answered as possible. So Ian, like myself, has been in the industry a long time, and they've got a great setup over in Toronto. So looking forward to having a chat with him and going over all the questions. So he'll be online very shortly. So just loading up now. When do we open? Hopefully soon in terms of reopening. Bryzy, that one. Hey, how are you? Good to see you, sir. And just very quickly answering for one about when we might reopen. And
You doing okay?
We're all good, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, we're okay. Same. Just kind of obviously, making our way through this deal, and every week is a different challenge, and but we're every week we're a step closer to being on the other side of it.
As you say, it's that bit of kind of the only thing at the moment is the not knowing when, and so the question of when will we reopen, unfortunately when we're allowed to. It's we're chomping at the bit to get going again. We've used the last few weeks to make some good changes, to put in a couple of new systems, help us manage things, manage workshop, manage orders, all that kind of process side of things. So actually the opportunity to do that's been great. If your cup is half full kind of thing, but it's given us the time to do that, and now we're just ready to get going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing at this time you and I never really have as much time. We're just going, we're full pedal down, and we're just, we've made it way through the quieter season, and we're ready to get into the meat of it. But obviously, right now we don't have the customers coming through the door, so it does afford you time to do other things and maybe address parts of the business that you would normally have the chance to look at and things like that. So, like you said, there are opportunities in this situation that we have to take advantage of.
Yeah, as you say, you've got to, as you say, take the time when you can. This is normally, for you guys in Toronto. Your season runs. When does your season really start off in Toronto?
I mean, I would say, Simon, ours is really starts March 1. Now, we always kind of considered the golf season to start right around the Masters, and that's when the course is open. That's the biggest difference probably over here, is that we have no winter golf.
Yeah.
So we shut it down for the most part. Middle of November is where the pretty much all the courses are done, and then nothing is open until the first couple of weeks in April.
Yeah. So we'd had a really busy February, March, and then so March through May is our silly season really, and then so we had a really busy start going. This is going to be great, and then wallop, then nothing. So it's been a bit of a weird one. But as you say, it gives you the chance to look at your processes, look at the studio, look at everything, and say right. I mean, we were planning the software change anyway, and I know James has been inputting all the products onto it, to about 1,300 of the things. I think he's really glad that there's not normal business going on around it. But yeah, it's actually talking about the Canada situation. One of the questions coming is what made you choose Canada? So for people that don't know, Ian was with TaylorMade Europe for 8 years, I believe.
I was with them for right around 7-8 years. Yeah.
And then went over to Modern Golf.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I was working at Turnberry, the TMPL there, and I got contacted by an investment group in Canada. Asked if I'd be interested in coming over. They were planning this new venture, and kind of, I had always been more curious about the agnostic side of the game, and probably had lost my full sense of it being all about one company and kind of everyone benefits from having one brand in their bag. I've never really believed that was the case. TaylorMade were a phenomenal company to work for, I will say that. During the period I worked for them was a real kind of growth spell for the company, and if we think about that time, 04 through to 11, the rise was quite meteoric from 300 series, 500 series, 7, 9, 11. I mean, those were the glory years really for TaylorMade, where they surpassed Callaway and became the number one brand in golf.
Yeah.
So it was a great time to be part of that, and I worked with some amazing people that you know very well. The guys that J Mac and Sean Brady and all those guys were great people to work with, and great mentors, great people to learn from. Even having the chance to go out and work on tour and do some weeks with Trotty and Alex Thorne and all the boys was also a phenomenal thing. So it was a really well-rounded experience, Simon, which is kind of what prepared me for going and doing something like modern golf at the time. But I would still say when we all started modern golf, myself and what ultimately became the True Spec boys, I don't really think we were really ready for that. We were good club fitters and club builders and that sort of thing, but what was lacking a little bit then was a little bit of back-end infrastructure and that sort of stuff. So as that side of my brain became more curious, I actually got into that part of it more than I enjoyed the club fitting side of things. I enjoyed the challenge of running the business. And then that kind of fueled me to do my own thing, really. I said, if I'm going to be curious and this is going to be my passion for the next 25 years, at some point I'm going to probably lose a little bit of interest in fitting clubs at some point. Not yet, but at some point I'm going to want to run my own business. And the opportunity just came to go do it.
Yeah, it's funny how it happens. And I guess I played a little bit first. Thankfully worked out very quickly. I wasn't good enough to earn a living because I wasn't. It was a career, but I definitely wasn't earning a living. And
it's a familiar story, that one, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
very short careers.
Too few at the top. Yeah, and but I knew I always wanted to. I knew I always wanted to be in golf. I'd done some corporate events, and when I was playing amateur stuff full time, I'd met James, who where he was training. I'd got some clubs done there, and through tinkering back and forth and fiddling with loft and lies and shafts and swing weights and everything, we got to know each other well. And then I think James saw that I wasn't going to earn a living quicker than I was ready to admit. And it was precision golf was James's idea originally. He said, I want to do this properly and do it on my own, but I need someone to fit. How about it? And it's I guess fell into it to a point, but I'd always been interested in whatever I was doing and kind of what went into things. If I whether it's when I was playing nutrition or technique or clubs, I felt if I could understand it better, I could get more out of the other side, which was a great concept.
What sort of player were you, Simon? Just out of interest, because I'm curious as to where the mindset goes, because I have my own theory about this, but I'd love to know what standard you were at.
I'd got sort of amateur golf. I was playing sort of +1, pushing +2. Had played relatively good representative. I mean, I played my county golf had Ross Fisher, Sam Osborne, Ross McGowan, James Heath, Zane Scotland. So I didn't play a lot of county representative golf because they were ridiculously good. But I'd play with those. I played a lot with Ross. I was at college with Sam growing up, and ball striking has always been my best bit. Mildly streaky short game, handsy. I mean, if I think back to what I know now and what I know about the swing and delivery and consistency and control now versus then, it could have been a bit more dangerous, but I wouldn't have had the 40-year-old head on my shoulders. I was always trying to overpower a course, and I was always relatively long, and not the most refined. I could hit pretty shots, but I was not a scorer. I was a trier, but I wasn't going to grind a score. I was a bit more on and off. But I've always been someone who's liked to analyze things. I've always liked to know the nuts. I like to know. I don't do something if I don't know how it's going to pan out. That's kind of my personality. So.
Yeah, I think that's something we share, isn't it? The analytical mindset to sort of try and look at a situation, go, why isn't this working? What can we do? It's problem solving. I always think of club fitting like problem solving. Your data is providing you with a set of problems, and you've got to try and identify the right points to find the solutions. I mean, I think I was the same. Failed playing career. My deal was a little bit different. I get into equipment because I didn't hit it very far. When I first started playing golf, I hit it absolutely
Changed now.
nowhere.
Look at your numbers recently.
Yeah, I mean, it has changed.
I've gone the other way. I was long and now I'm not.
I would say when I was still playing golf and probably the best I was ever playing, I wouldn't have swung the driver more than 100 miles an hour. So I really struggled competitively when we would go to bigger courses, and it would really take a toll in my game playing those big, long, demanding golf courses. I could fiddle my way around the short courses, you know, a reasonable short game and kind of fairly tidy and could kind of plot my way around. But when you put me on the Gleneagles Centenary course in the Scottish PGA, you know, probably the best example is I played about as good as I could play in a really tough day. Shot, I think, 2 over par and was about 7th after day 1 in the Scottish PGA. The next day it was a little bit windier again, and I didn't play so good, and I shot, I think it was a shot about 81, because the course just became too tough on a day that I didn't quite have it. You know, lots of long second shots, and at that point I knew, you know, this just isn't for me. I just didn't have enough horsepower to play the game at that level. Which is funny because I was doing more to gain distance then than I do now. You know, I was training hard. I was working with the best coaches in the country. I was doing all this stuff. I just couldn't figure out, you know, how to get that distance. But you know, as it turns out, it was all sequence and it was all patterns, things that really changed for me. So I wish I'd knew that then.
Mind you might not be doing what you're doing now. I guess it's
yeah, that's it, isn't it? I know.
Meant to
can
be.
never look
Failed
back.
playing career, meant to be. Yeah.
That's it. I enjoy the few rounds I get now, and you know, I wouldn't swap it because I still don't think even if I hit it as far as I did now, I still wouldn't have been good enough. It wouldn't have changed anything.
I'd still find ways of not getting around in the right score. Getting very good at getting in my own way. Yeah. But I guess whilst it's fun talking about the old stuff, I guess people want to hear about what we do really. So, and I guess one of the bits one of the guys was saying to chat about is it kind of, I think a lot of people wonder where you start from a fitting point of view in terms of what's, you know, someone who's new into the game or new into looking at the equipment side of things is what sort of start point. I guess it's an interesting one. I think over the years it's changed in that there are so many more options now and the process can be so much more involved. It's a much longer process now because of the amount of options and the amount of depth and information than it used to be. So I guess if you get someone coming going, okay, I want to get fit but I don't know where to start, how would you gauge that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for most people, what we do is kind of like if people get aware of what you do and what we do, it can become a bit intimidating to the beginner golfer because they go, well, that's a bit much. All that data, you know, all that information, you know, I'm not really that consistent. And I think we just try and hammer home, as I know you guys do, is, you know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You know, if you're a beginner golfer, let's establish the basics. Let's get the length of the club right. Let's get the grip size right. Let's get the weight of the club right. Let's get the right head design in your hand that will give you the best opportunity to blend distance and consistency and sort of, you know, get the right ball flight established early on. Then you can at least develop and build a proper swing around the right equipment. I think a lot of people are put off by thinking that it's, you know, it has to be in the aftermarket shaft world and it's going to cost me, you know, £3,500-4,000, you know, which over here $5,000-6,000. But I think people should just go and get fit and at least establish those things, whether it's with someone like us, or go to your local club, a demo day. You know, all these fitters have the tools at their disposal to do the basics to get someone started. You know, and then obviously as it goes down the line, they can get a little bit more detailed than that, but at least start with a fitting. Yeah,
I was going to say there's no, certainly I know for you guys to be the same. There's no obligation to do anything as well. I think a lot of players either assume it's just for the better players, which really isn't the case. It's almost the complete opposite. No. But it's that actually that you know, as fitters, whilst yes, part of our job is to sell clubs, we're not actually, you know, we just want people to play better, and it doesn't matter whether that's just changing grips, whether it's changing lie. And actually, sometimes the best way forward is just to do the initial analysis and then say, okay, well, this is where your set's at, and this is a kind of a base look across it. And if you were to prioritise doing anything, maybe look at this bit first. But there's no, I guess, just having the knowledge that that's what your clubs are, how you and your clubs are performing together, and why. Even that alone is a good base point. At least you can then take an educated decision as to whether you want to do anything from there or not. So it doesn't have to be a case of buying a complete, as you say, a full-blown sort of £3,000-4,000 set of clubs and off you go. It could just be, everything's fine for now. If you're doing swimming, seeing a coach, go and do some more of that, and then as and when you're comfortable to come back and we've got a base point and we can cross-reference there. But it's just layers of what you can achieve rather than necessarily having to go all in one go, which I think a lot of people assume is just going to be what's going to happen.
Exactly. I think people avoid it almost like, that salesperson in the car showroom. You kind of walk around them when you're browsing. I think people look at our stores and they kind of do that around us. Maybe you'd like to go and have a look at that car, but the salesman's putting you off. And, we try and that was one of the reasons we started the YouTube channel, in all honesty, Simon, was because we wanted people to see that wasn't what we're all about. Yeah. We're about, a lot more than that. And, the customer will always dictate the nature of the session, whether it's a gapping session, whether it's a ball fit, whether it is for a full set or whether it's just to baseline their current set to see where the weaknesses are, and maybe there's an opportunity to improve something and improve the blend of their set from top to bottom. So, trying to show that that's more what companies like us do was very, very important to me, and I thought the best opportunity for us to do that was through the YouTube channel.
Yeah, as I say, people then can see the process. It's just transparent as to what's done. It's driven by how things perform, not a case of right, we need to sell X amount of clubs per week. It's just it's long-term relationships we're looking for with clients, isn't it? Rather than it's not just a one-off sale.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, and I think our industry is going more that way. That's something we've been for about 18 months. We've been working on implementing that type of process where we're able to have more of an ongoing relationship with the clients, where we have access to their scores, we have access to how they're performing. Things like Arcos is something we've just integrated at TXG. So every fitter has a database of their clients. And at any point, they can see when they're playing rounds. They can see if their scores are going up or down. And Arcos do an amazing job of creating a custom dashboard for club fitters and coaches. It's really is the next level of how we as club fitters can have a true impact on our clients and customers. So I believe that will be the way in which we'll be able to do our jobs better, because we will have real in-field data of how people are performing, not just in the bay, because in the bay can work both ways. You get some people who overperform, maybe they struggle in elements, and when the lies of balls above their feet or below their feet. We don't have that in the bay, but it is a great baseline. And then you've got the other people who get put off. They kind of start looking around them, feel a bit claustrophobic, and don't believe the data. There's things like that. So it works both ways.
Yeah, as you say, you get people who kind of clamour, who kind of worry if they're going to be good enough or get nervous in the bay. And so the Arcos, it's been interesting. We had a look with the guys Arcos this time last year. And as you say, the layers of data, the amount of data on there is incredible, and the potential to go in and actually see, right, is there a gap that's missing? Is there a miss in a particular place? And preempt, it might not require someone to contact you. We might be able to say, actually, looking at the data, this is where it might be. I think the only issue over here so far, certainly last year, was the range of grips was very, very low, very small. So to be able to sort of actually kind of implement it into the fitting was sort of tough, because there were only a couple of grips, and that should be opening up quite a bit over here. I think the plan was all the Lamcron grips, good chunk of the Golf Cry grips. Obviously Ping are using that with some of theirs as well. So that's a really interesting kind of technological development. Yeah,
and I think we're probably going to go down the line of having just the removable sensors for most of our clients, purely because we don't necessarily want you to play 100% of your rounds with that on there. You know, if we think about like back home, like the month or the weekly medal back home, or that sort of thing, like, you know, I don't want you to play every single round where, you know, you're out with the boys messing around and you're hitting different shots, dropping a few balls. Like, we don't need the data from that, but I do want to know what the data says when you have a card in your hand. I want to know what that's like, because ultimately I want you to perform better in that environment. You know, want you to perform your best. So whether that's, you know, plugging them in for those alone, then you know, that's a good option. But, you know, anything that gives us several billion data points can only make you and I better at what we do, and more informed and more connected. Like you said, you know, I love what you said about being preemptive to what your customers' needs are. That's exactly how I see it. If I can reach out to my customer and say, I see you keep hitting that 3-wood left and everything else is in pretty good shape, I've got you booked in, I've got 3 slots available for you, you let me know which one works for you, we're going to tune up the loft sleeve on that 7 fairway wood, and I think we can get you into a slightly better setting, and that should be you set for the season. I mean, that just puts you in a different level from a customer service standpoint. So I love that it gives us that opportunity.
Yeah, and it's actually a question Hinchy said, how do you charge that as a service, regular reviews of a client's data / our costs? I mean, certainly I would be looking at that would just be something that we would, the reviewing the data would be something we'd just do because that's all part of it, part of the service. And equally speaking, if there's a tweak to be made to something, if there's a, you know, particular, I mean, most golfers would assume, having been fit, it either goes one of two ways. Either anything that doesn't quite seem right, they'll let you know straight away and tweak it, or it goes completely the other way. They go, well, it must be me now. And if they're missing a shot at a particular club right, they must just assume they're swinging it badly, and it could be a fractional change. And so that way, I think it gives us a kind of almost a more detached way to look at it and go, no, that clearly doesn't fit with where everything else is. As you say, you know, we get as close to an exact science as we can in one visit in the bay, but on course and in the bay day to day can be slightly different. So it's not always, you know, quite often it will require just a little tweak here or there after the initial session. Without a
doubt, I think that's exactly the key, and we're going to implement it where certainly for my own fits, it's now built into the fit fee. So the fit fee will include a set of Arcos sensors. So it's you know, you don't even have to make the decision. It's like, well, do I really want to spend another I don't know what it costs in the UK, maybe £150 or £160.
Yeah, sounds about. Well, they normally it has been just a case of you've got to get grips with the sensors. So that's been, again, part of the difficulty has been actually getting, you know, just getting a, you know, instead of, say, for example, you know, Cobra or Ping, you can get just the grips, which have got the little kind of channel in the top, the clip to go in. And then what happens if you want some sensors where you've got to spend 150 quid buying some grips that you're never going to use to put them in? So that's been only just the slight kind of teething problem so far. But yeah.
So you know, I think that'll be a game changer for our industry. And you know, I heard some stuff a while back in the process of us looking at it, and some people were going, well, you know, Arcos isn't really that different because, you know, an iPhone can plot your coordinates, and really anyone who can develop software can do the same thing, and they can tell you where you're hitting it and at the end of the round. But I think what they're really underestimating is the back end capabilities of it, the way the data is interpreted. As we all know, data on a screen is just that. It's just numbers on a screen. How your interpretation then takes that down the journey of a fit is the true art of it. You know, that's why we call it the art and science, because you have numbers and data points and physics to work with. But in the other part, you know, you have every single customer that walks through your door is unique. They have different preferences, they have different feel, you know, they have different different games that they play on different courses. 60 million golfers worldwide, and there aren't two the same. So, you know, it's important that we treat them unique.
Yeah, and that's part of our job is to dial into how they respond to things. I'm watching one of your videos with Matt. I think it was one of the driver ones, and saying how you get, we've seen it over the years. You get the whatever standard player who can feel the most minute change in the setup of the club. We've got one of our clients is an international hockey player, and he's got the most ridiculous feel I've ever seen. And then you've got other players who are at top level who you've got to do a lot of changing for them to actually register there's something really noticeable going on. I think part of it is golfers don't believe they are good enough to feel what they are, and as you say, it's just physics. It's just weight changes, balance changes, length changes. It all affects the way that you and the club move together, and actually we should trust our instincts because they are pretty good, our senses. But you do get some real freaks out there who can feel like, mine feels pretty good over the 15 years and I've always been quite handsy and known balance point changes and can feel dead weight changes, but his was ridiculous. It was like 1 gram. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's one thing that has been an evolution of for me in the debate is at first when people used to say things like, this one feels a little stiffer or softer or heavier or feel the head more. I probably used to brush that off quite a lot more than I do now and go, all right, good one or whatever. But, what I learned was any time that someone said something, I went through a period of checking it and just measuring it and going to over to the sort of frequency machine or going over to the swing weight scale. I can't think of one instance where someone was wrong. It might be in tiny margins, and you go, well, it's not much in it, but you're not wrong. There's three cycles in that, but it is softer.
And everyone's language feels different. So what one person says feels a certain way, is going to be different to what another person says the same thing and actually senses it differently as well. It's I think that's the challenge from a fitting point of view is, you say, in not a lot of time you've got to dial into how someone perceives things. And that's part of the fun of it, is that, as you say, everyone who walks through the door is different and got a different way of moving, swinging, explaining what they think. And actually the challenge of really kind of when you know you've dialed into what they're saying and can recognize what they're feeling and kind of you're on the same wavelength. That's always I think that's a nice bit of the fit. We go, right, we're absolutely on a par here and working together.
Definitely. I think, and the example of that is always when you give someone a slightly lighter shaft and they go, the club just got heavier. And you'll ask them, well, where did it get heavier? Well, I feel the head a lot more. And then you explain to them how the balance has changed and it's the lighter shaft that has given you more awareness of the head. And I start to see people really enjoy the process at that point because they're learning something. They go, oh yeah, that's right, I can really feel the head now, and when I swing it I can get a different sense of timing when I do that, and then when you flip it back into the heavier shaft again, okay, I feel the weight a little closer to my hands now, and it's maybe a more sort of even distribution of that weight across the whole unit. So it's so much fun because like you say, there's no two fits are the same. Even if they present somewhat similar, swings and launch conditions, they're not going to give you the same answers to the questions that you ask them, which gives us a new set of challenges.
So I guess, technology with fittings, actually very quickly, Seb asking about Spider X weights, difficult at the moment. TaylorMade won't send them out. So, there are some other places you can get some weights that weigh the same amount. It's hopefully they'll release them fairly soon. So, technology and fitting, I think we've seen in the time that we've both been doing it since 2003, 2004, the tools at our disposal have gone through the roof. It's been such an upward trend in the technology around, data in sports generally, but I think in golf in particular, it seems to be that side's gone up massively. For us with, you guys use GC Quad, we use TrackMan, and one of the questions was what's better, and TrackMan versus Quad, that was Mike KT18, and my thing is that there's very little between them. Part of it is we're used to using. They both give a lot of very good data, and they the interface is a little bit different, but part of it is, I guess, we get used to our tools, and once you know how to work it, know how it's I guess communicating that data back to you, the more you do it. I mean, we use TrackMan since I think 2007, 12, 13 years now. So it's you get to know the ins and outs of it, and when to discard something because it's there's something not quite showing. So where TrackMan have been working hard on face strike, and that's had a few knock-on effects in terms of shot shapes and that side of things. You get to learn when to trust it and when to go, you know what, actually we'll just put that one to one side. They're both pushing it really hard in terms of what they're doing, and into say the layers of data, the amount of information, the accuracy that it's coming through. And so we throw over to you for this one as well. But my feeling is that they're both pushing forwards, and as long as one of them doesn't do something crazy, they're both great pieces of kit.
Yeah. I mean, so I was a TrackMan user, similar time when you guys had them, Simon. I had the first sort of TrackMan in my hands in 2006. I used it up until 2016. And was firmly a TrackMan guy. Was embedded in the university program, and was heavily involved in all that sort of stuff. And I had used a GC2 briefly at Turnbrae. TMPL had decided to go down that line and invest in GC2s. Didn't particularly enjoy the GC2, to be honest. I felt like I was a little bit I didn't have HMT on it, which was the problem. I felt like I was being stripped back of a lot of the sort of answers that I was able to give clients. So moving into modern golf, we were back to TrackMan was great. But like you said, you know its limitations. You know indoors, you know where to identify. Okay, you hit that one in the toe. We've seen the ball flight represent something. But you can explain it, and as long as you can explain it to the customer, the problem lies is when people don't understand that that's going on, and they diagnose based on the wrong things. That's when I guess someone could fall into an issue. My transition from TrackMan into GC Quad was not easy. I did not enjoy that transition whatsoever. After about a week and a half, I was all set to send the foresight units back. I just hated it. My eyes didn't go to the right place on the screen. I'm trying to deliver a fit in a way that I'm used to doing it, and I'm not able to go to the places I want to deliver the message. And I went, this just can't go on. And I just kind of bit down, and I just went, okay, stick with it for a little bit longer, and then I kind of got my flow with it. And ever since, I've been really comfortable with GC Quad. And I mean, camera based obviously has its benefits indoors with certain things. They read speed differently. They read angle attack different. They read path different. So again, just as long as you can explain to someone what those differences are between reading the center of the mass, the trail edge of the club versus the face, then someone, it's not that difficult to get you. It's a fairly short conversation. I love the interface and where TrackMan has developed that. I have to take my hat off to them. I think they've left foresight behind when it comes to the user interface. I think that's a huge benefit to them. So, like you said, they're both phenomenal systems. They both have great, great sort of information, and it's just whatever you prefer.
Again, quick question, similar subject. One, Elliot B said, thoughts on SkyTrack, numbers seem to be accurate except for spin. I think anything that's going to be lower cost is more of a kind of a consumer-based piece, which SkyTrack is. Number one, as long as it's giving you consistent numbers, you can then work from there. If they're not quite right, I mean, this was before we got measured spin with the TrackMan. It was consistent, so you knew what base you were going off. And the only thing that will, if the spin's off, is going to give you strange distances. So as long as you can work out with your system relative to what happens on the course, that relative difference and the what indoors equals outdoors, then it still gives you something worthwhile using as you said earlier, and it's about understanding the limitations of what you've got and the failings of it and the good bits of it, and saying, right, I can utilize that bit and take that to the course.
Yeah, I always end up just giving people the advice of if you really want to know your numbers and get sort of accurate data, just go pay for the service. You know, rather than investing in the personal unit, which may kind of, I've not seen one of the personal units yet that I've been impressed with. I'll be honest. We've had a few sent to us. We've had to shelf doing some videos on them because we're just not that channel that rips a product apart.
Yeah.
But we would have had the opportunity to do so with some of these personal launch monitor units, because, you know, if we were looking at something like average apex of the ball flight, and there's 80 feet of difference between what's actually happening and what's being read is happening. You know, spin rates and distances, but you know they're sort of somewhat inconsistent. So I just say people, you know, go and pay. You know, most places you'll be able to find a gapping session for maybe £50, something like that. Maybe a couple of times a year, 50, you know, £75. Maybe do that once or twice a year if you really play a lot of golf. That'll give you the information that you need. I don't think you need to be overkill, you know, before your competition every single week, you know, going and checking your data. So I just pay for the service.
Yeah, I guess, I think about, that's the other line for it is, don't spend so much on one piece of kit and then go somewhere, you know, you've got reliable numbers. Because if the spin's the bit that in particular, the more you pay, the better that's going to be, because it's the effective frames per second to get accurate spin data is high, and that's where as you pay less, that's where the quality really drops off.
For sure.
So it's taking the tech and fitting side of things on. Obviously, you guys using gears now, or have been for a year or so, and that's got a vast array of data to it. And is that something that how much has that changed the way you fit, or has it changed the way you fit?
Yeah, it's changed. It's changed the way we measure things dynamically. There's no question. My only problem is, though, if we were just doing a launch monitor fit, call it that takes about 4.5 hours to go through the full bag. If we add gears to that, we could potentially be into 6-7 hours. It doesn't really make sense at that point. Your time, you know, you can't give up that much of your time to one single fit. The economics of the business it just doesn't make sense at that point. So we've used it as a research tool, as a training tool, you know, a little kind of, I guess, spoiler alert for a video we just done the other day with gears was on grip size. And, you know, we were basically going, what are all the things that change when you change grip size? Probably most people would assume there's some element of influence on the grip roll, on then ultimately on the face rotation. But what are the knock-on effects of that? So we saw in the same player a 4-degree difference in spin loft between an undersized grip and an oversized grip. If you think of being in a fit and trying to influence spin loft to you know, the tune of 4 degrees, you're working. You know, you're choosing different characteristics of heads. You're maybe looking at, you know, you're over at the lofted line machine making some static adjustments. You're maybe looking at something for the shaft to make a slight delivery change. But trying to get 4 degrees is a lot. And to know that you can do it via a grip change is it's one of those light bulb eureka moments where it's like, holy moly, as one of many things that we can change to influence the ball flight of a player, that's a significant one. So we're finding these types of nuggets all the time with gears, which is what's providing huge value for the fitters. And as we build a team, we want everyone to have that information, so that, you know, people can get a slightly different experience versus our competition around us.
Because I must admit, that was my feeling, what you said at the beginning in terms of time, and that's one of the upsides of tech, is there's so much data and so much information. The downside is you say, once you've got that, is then there are so many extra things that you've got to go down that hole to check and double check and cross reference, and I must admit, I did wonder how much of a R&D versus actual fitting info it would be. However, the R&D influences the quality and the efficiency of the fitting itself.
Yeah.
So I mean, with the grip side of things coming in, is that going to mean in terms of where you're fitting with your fitting system, obviously the Club Connect side of things or similar system that we use, in terms of using different grips within these, would you blow them on and off with the compressor?
Definitely. And I would say probably, you know, the boys are pretty apt at doing that already. You know, in the bay, there'll be loft and lie adjustments, there'll be grip adjustments. Maybe not when you're baselining as much. You know, your baseline getting the numbers, but certainly as you start to round off the session and you build. You put the club in the hands that is the closest to what they're going to have when they have that built final set.
Yeah.
We want them to experience the ball flight, the feel, and part of that is the grip. You know, it's the only point of contact we have with the golf club. You know, we have 2 points of contact. We have the ground and we have the grip. That's the points of contact we have. So we have to understand, you know, how those are sort of impacting us. The other thing with gear, Sam, which has been really, I think, useful is the guys are understanding the journey of the golf club to impact way better than they ever have. And I include myself in that. You know, we have launch monitors, we're talking about quad versus TrackMan, and both are phenomenal. But they tell us what happened at impact.
Yeah.
They don't tell us what happens prior to impact. So, you know, I can use gears as like a pre-impact launch monitor. I want to know everything from how that club is being sort of taken back and loaded and unloaded. I mean, there's certain things with shaft deflection, again, that we're learning all the time that we just didn't know before because we couldn't measure it.
Yeah.
We understand what speed, you know, how we get to speed and how we, you know, apply dynamic loft and all those dynamic measurements. One thing we don't know is how it got to that dynamic measurement. So I think gears is in a league of its own when it comes to that sort of stuff. I remember when I first saw Enzo, Fujikura Enzo, I think it was 2011, they brought it to the PGA show, and I remember just looking at, they had their R&D guy sitting at the table. I think Joe Miller was in hitting balls, and you've got all these data points showing up on the screen. And I said to the guy, the Fuji guys, what does all that mean? And they went, we don't know. There are so many cameras right now giving so much information. We actually don't know what half of this stuff means yet. That's part of the evolution of Enzo. And at that point, I went, holy, one day I really want to get my hands on something that can give me that much information that I can relay that back to the customer in a digestible fashion. And that was never available because Enzo was $250,000 and you never actually owned the system. Yeah. That was to lease it. So it was never going to be possible. And then gears came out and I knew Michael Neff from the TMPL relationship, etc. So that made a lot of sense to us. So I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's those sort of little bits where, again, so I've watched your videos online and things. It's people. Some of the questions we get asked, and a couple of ones coming through, are sort of saying, "Oh, how do you, how much, one chap said your comment saying the shaft weight more important than flexing. Do I agree?" And the answer is absolutely. But it's those nuances between going. A lot of players assume that going between an R and an S or an S and an X makes a really noticeable difference, which actually, in terms of the influence that has on the actual ball flight and performance is really minimal. However, with the gear system, you'd be able to say, well, actually, the slightly softer shaft loads at a better place, or actually kind of unloads more consistently in the right place, and then you're going to get more consistent data out of it, more consistent spin profile, and just to, as I say, to dial in that little bit more to why something's going to be better and ultimately consistently better.
Yeah, I mean, I like that little series you've been doing with comparing different shafts, and maybe taking two that have slightly opposing bend profiles and showing how they load differently for you makes your timing different, and you'll see shot shapes. Your DNA as a player hasn't changed. You haven't all of a sudden went from being this type of player to that type of player, even though your ball flight might represent that's happened. The reality is the shaft has influenced your ability to time the golf club and deliver it into the back of the ball. So that's what the role of the shaft is. It is a timing device, and it is an energy production device. But again, another thing with gears is I was always under the impression that we were trying to generate lead deflection with the golf shaft, always trying to get that shaft to accelerate and have maximum contribution as it kind of came into impact. And I guess in some senses that is the case, but when you're in maximum lead deflection and accelerating at a rate, or have accelerated at a significant rate, the reality is what we found in gears is by the time you hit the golf ball, you've lost all that energy. So that I kept seeing these efficiencies, obviously is what Foresight called it, the smash factor was always lower. The more I would see the shaft and lead deflection, I'm like, this is completely counterintuitive to me, because I always thought that the shaft and lead deflection was going to be producing the highest sort of contribution towards acceleration and speed. It actually, when the shaft is in slight negative deflection, is when we get the high smash factors, because it's been in the point of lead or match trail deflection. So at the point where it's bending away from the handle and accelerating to being ahead of the handle, that's at the point where we generate maximum speed, and you're getting the most bang for your buck out of that. Now, the reality is you and I never tell a player that. We're never standing in a bay going, well, your lead deflection, your trail deflection.
Not unless you've got go-go gadget eyes.
The bag's over the shoulder and they're on their way out the door at that point. But for you and I is to have those tools to go, wow, that's really, really interesting. With that type of player, we see those types of delivery conditions. I'm going to keep that up my sleeve as one of the tools in my toolbox to, for the fitting session.
Yeah, and I think so. The weight question for me, going slightly back into one of the other questions that have been sent in. This was Royal Samadin. It's ultimately without the weight being right. I mean, I always say from a fitting point of view, I would say that the player and the club have to interact at maximum speed, maximum control, and that really, as you said, it's just physics. It's the energy and inertia in the club, and if you can match the two up with the balance point in the right place, the player has to do the least through impact to put the club on the back of the ball repeatedly. So ultimately, primary function, that's weight. It's I think with golfers, we kind of think about the most complicated solution to the simplest problem a lot of the time. So, well, if I do that, my wrists and arms, or I get a bit stuck, or most of the time, golfers get in the wrong position as they start the way down, because the biggest change in force in the swing is as you start. It's the hardest far off in any direction is as you start the downswing. So if anything's going to break down, it's going to break down there. So if the weight's off, it's gone straight away, and then you're firefighting it through the ball. So, so in terms of process, I certainly personally would always focus on that bit first to get as true an impact as I can.
Yeah.
With a head, if using our system, either the same head or a head as similar as possible to what someone's got, because then you can get a picture. Right, this is. If we get the bit between the player and the club head right, or as near as damn it right first, that's your actual flight profile. And then from there, you can influence it in a controlled way rather than kind of just do that and that should work. And then you're using the tools you've got the right way rather than, say, use a high kick point to bring it down. Well, if it's too heavy, gets stuck behind, you flip it and you stick it up in the air. Yeah. So heavy shaft doesn't always mean low launch and vice versa. So once you get to that baseline, then you can use all the tech and the club heads and the shafts and to fine tune it and bring it all the way you want it to be.
Yeah, exactly right. That's it. And again, as a tool, we have seen those types of things on gears. The gears is great because it gives you the visual movement of the golf club, but it also gives you the graphs where it's obviously measuring the spikes in motion, where in maybe in transition or at impact, you can see where there's sort of increases in energy. And that's something where we see things like people change when they get a lighter club, they change when they get a heavier club. So it's you have to be using all these resources. As a player going to see a fitter who can identify the right one. There are just too many products in the marketplace nowadays. I don't know, unless you even as club pros, I don't know how club pros navigate club fitting anymore without just surrendering and going, you know what, there's just too many options, because a club pro has so much on their plate that, you know, they're managing the membership and their staff and sales and soft goods, hard goods. How do they then spend the time to do what you and I do, which is learn every nuance about the equipment in the marketplace and how each component interacts with the other? I think at that point nowadays you have to somewhat surrender to, there's just too much going on. There's just too many variables now to really deliver the right experience for their members. So, you know, and even the tech rep stuff is great, but the reality is it's not close to what you do. You know, and
I think it depends what level of service they're wanting to offer. I think, you know, any form of fitting is better than just that looks pretty, I'll have a set of those. So as long as they're going, if someone just wants a fairly basic fitting, and you know, it's still going to be better than just the consumer going, oh well, Sergio uses those, so I'll pick those up. But I think if I can give little swing keys here and there. You know, one thing I think we as fitters have to remember, that people primarily come in to see us for a fitting. They're not here to go and get an in-depth lesson. So, but equally speaking, if they need it, it's our responsibility to tell them they're going to get more out of the swing trains than they will clubs. But I might give a little kind of key here or there to say, you know, actually, if we can just, you know, get the face squaring up a little bit better, or you can just move the path a little bit more neutrally, then we can really get X out of it. But you know, you and I fit all day every day, so you know, for 15 years worth of doing it, our eyes are pretty good at picking things up pretty quickly.
Definitely.
But in the same way, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, I'll give you a lesson, because I can't coach. I'm not qualified, and I haven't spent the last 15 years coaching. So I think, as you said, recognizing what's the core product that you offer, and you know, if there's someone else who can do something else better, let them do it, because that's what they've spent their time learning and getting expertise in, and we've done it in this for the last 15, 16 years, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
That's exactly it. And I feel like we're in such a fortunate position, having been in the space for that long, because we have seen the progression from no launch monitor to launch monitor to interchangeable components to, you know, R&D tools, and we've been able to build. I mean, we're relatively young. You know, if you look at when people are considered top coaches, normally, you know, Butch Harmon probably wasn't considered, you know, a real, you know, the best coach in the world until he was probably 50 something. Led's probably somewhat similar. You know, I feel like as club fitters, we're at such an advantage, because really, I mean, sure, you went from, you know, persimmon to metal heads, right? That was a big change, but we weren't really in the detail of club fitting then. Now we look at the explosion, really, since the components became interchangeable, aftermarket shafts, the golf ball changed, the head size exploded, shafts got longer and lighter. As soon as those variables became so vast, you and I had a job in our hands at that point, and we were able to really accelerate up the ladder in terms of being the experts. So it's a fortunate situation, I think.
Our timing was everything at that point. So as you say, 03, 04 for us, 04 or 05 we started, and that was just when, as you say, when all that I guess particularly head and shaft tech, actually, that was when that just really started to move forward. Materials used, and actually I think the industry, the head manufacturers were really pushing at that time, and you know, we saw just a massive acceleration in what was actually doable, and it's I mean, thankfully, actually, I know certainly for me as a fitter, I kind of look back to then and go, well, actually, I was able to gradually build up from 3 or 4 brands to 4 or 5 to 6 to 7 to what we have now. And you know, I feel sorry for the guys who come in to work for us now, because they got to learn all of it in one go, which I never had to do, thankfully. So it's a steep learning curve.
I've said that to a lot of people recently in some of these Insta lives and stuff like that. That I actually, think that our guys have a disadvantage who start with us now, because they don't have the sort of gradual increase in experience, and they don't have the different exposure to a range. I mean, being on the range, driving up and down Scotland, Northern England, over to Ireland to a demo day. One day you could be in Aberdeen, doing a freezing cold demo day on the range at King's Links, and then you're down the next day to Newcastle to the Wynyard Club, and you're doing one down there off a nice turf, and you see so many different types of swings and different players, and you gain so much knowledge from having to work with different players. And the beauty of that is, at that point, you're giving that away for free. So you were seeing lots of different people. It wasn't like now you stand in the bay with one person for 4 hours. In 4 hours, I might see 25 people. That's 25 examples of how a golfer plays the game.
Yeah.
That, in terms of the database, and how you log those problems and those solutions, it's remarkable how much then you just store that and use it further down the line. And one thing, like you said, is if you have to be a practitioner in this game, you have to do it. That's one reason I'm so reluctant to go and run the business, because I can't yet. I don't feel like I can take myself out of the bay, because I love doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to stop being a practitioner. I don't want to be the guy who stands there and spouts, just the technical things without really being the guy who applies them at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, true. I think just noting time-wise, if you've got a bit more time, I mean, we could sit and do this all day, but in a couple of minutes we'll log off, relog back on, because there's still plenty to go over. We'll do just whilst there we go, a couple of questions that have come through. Nick Scrutton, he's sent a few in, and so I'm not ignoring you, Nick. One of the things actually he said is bad fit's probably more damaging than not getting fit at all, which I would agree with, because you then the problem is if anything is less than suitable, the player's going to have to make adaptations and compensations to make it work. And then the problem is, the more you fight that, the more swings you make trying to compensate for something, the better your body gets at doing it. But the problem is, the further away from where you need to be you get. So it can destroy some players' confidence and their confidence in fitting. But it can take you a long way away from where you're actually trying to be. So, and it's a difficult one to know. If you go somewhere and you trust the results, and then you go away and your game's not quite right, it's a difficult one to kind of say, well, is that me or is that the clubs? But I would certainly, from our standpoint, I always say to people, if you're not sure about something, for God's sake, tell us. The Brits aren't very good at it. They tend to swallow it and go, oh no, I'm not good enough. But,
that's what I say.
We want to know.
Don't suffer in silence. Do not suffer in silence. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do us any good. You got to speak up.
Yeah.
All right.
Two very quick ones. A couple of others I've got noted down. We'll do straight back on, but we'll go off back on and see you in a moment.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you to everyone who's staying with us. As per usual on our Instagram lives, they go on longer than an hour, but hopefully you're enjoying the content. Ian's always great to chat to. We always enjoy seeing him whenever we go to the trade show, which is the only time we really get to catch up. He's great company and very knowledgeable. One of the top guys in the industry. So it's always great to share thoughts with him. So whilst Ian's logging back on, actually a couple of quick questions. One was about age and fitness, and is that a key to getting fitted? The answer is no. It's really, I think anyone who's, it doesn't matter what age, what standard, what fitness. I mean, I think the ultimate form of fitting, I've done fittings for disabled golfers who've got amputee above the knee. You don't have to be a scratch +1, +2 golfer to get fitted. Actually, there's a strong argument to say that the higher handicap you are, the bigger benefit from fitting, because I'm sure you'd agree with this, is that for the lower handicap players and the pros and things, you're fine-tuning things, you're nipping around the edges to try and squeeze the last drop of performance out. But most golfers have got completely the wrong bag set up in they might be playing a 4-iron, but they should be playing a hybrid and stopping at 6-iron. Actually, one of the other questions is what percentage of people have the correct setup? Industry-wide, 2%. I mean, it's got to be pretty low. But yeah, I think any golfer can benefit from a well-informed fitting. Part of it's going to be just giving you the confidence you've got the right thing in your bag, and you can just go out and play and enjoy the game for what it is. But I would say that the less able you are to manipulate your swing and adapt to the clubs, the bigger benefit you're going to have, because the better you can adapt, the more likely you are to say, well, that's not me, that shouldn't be happening, I'm going to get this checked out. So yeah, as Ian said earlier, do not suffer in silence. Go and even if it's just get the session, check what's going on, check where you are, and see whether it's more important to go down the line of having some lessons or doing some fitness work, or if you've got an injury, doing some rehab, or going down the club route. Anywhere worth their salt will be able to advise you correctly, one way or the other.
Yeah, I think as well, Simon, the people who in our industry, or not even so much in our industry, the people who are against our industry are the people who have had a bad experience at some point with a fit. They are the player who went and got a fitting based on a bunch of static sort of measurements and being maybe it was the situation where they were on a lie board. They've got the toe, they're a handle raiser, they've got the toe digging in, the impact tape is showing the mark is in the toe. The fitter's, well, you're 2-3 degrees upright, we got to move that mark back into the middle, but not taking into the dynamics of the situation. The player already misses more to the left and they struggle with that. So by moving that lie angle upright, really what you're doing is destabilizing their ball flight even more. You've got lovely divots, but you've got a pretty crappy ball flight. You've got that left start line going on now, because the way the loft is tilted up and to the left, you no longer have the ability to offset the start line of the golf ball and bring it back online. So those are the people who are against what you and I do, because predominantly they've had a bad experience. They went, well, that club fitting's a lot of nonsense. I had a club fit one time and I played the worst golf of my life. Well, unfortunately, there's levels to this.
And I say the other add-on to that would be that it could actually be a very good fit, but if the build doesn't match the fit, and I always think that's one of the things that's really critical. There's some fabulous fitters out there, but who then go and send a spec off. They might fit really well for even, it's just but for kind of a fitting cart fitting, who can do a great job. But if the build doesn't match the fit, that's it can be, and that's something we certainly pride ourselves on, and you guys do, on getting it absolutely spot on, as it was in the fitting bay in the end product, to sort of 0.1 of a swing weight point. And people go, does it really make a difference? The answer is it's just physics. It's but if the build's bad, it doesn't reflect fairly on the fitting as well.
You take the example, like we were talking about grips earlier and grip size, and you take that. Someone goes to a demo day, tries the G410, loves it, really great feeling driver for them. They get fitted to the right loft, the right setting, perfect. Then what the first thing they do when they get it, they take it to their pro and they go, can you put on that new Golf Pride, the +4 mid-size for me, 67
You should see James's face at the moment.
and all of a sudden, the poor fitter has been, he's been done up like a kipper, because the person goes away and goes, I really don't like the feel of this driver. That guy, must have gave me a bad fit, not knowing that you've just compromised the club by 4 swing weight points. So that club that was D3, D4 is now playing C9, D0, and they go, I no longer really feel the head very much. I don't like this club.
I had a good one. I had one chap once, sort of slightly funny, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying it as well, where he had one of the RBZ drivers, the white tailaway drivers, and he came and said, look, it's just not working anymore. So came back in, and it sprayed it with hammerite to make it black, and it put the head weight up about 6 grams. And of course afterwards he thought about it and go, well, it's obvious, it's you're adding weight to it, but at the time he just thought it was spray paint. And so it's those, and even the smallest thing really you can. It's like people say, "Oh, I'll just hack an inch off the club; it'll be easier to hit." But whereas you just lose the feel for the club head. So everything you do, every action has a reaction in the setup and the way that the club swings. And so, for goodness sake, please, if anyone wants to do anything, give us a call and ask what might happen before you do something.
Definitely. And I know, I know you guys personally well enough to know that you guys you run your business the same way we run ours, in that we don't ever want it to be a one and done transaction with any customer. Use it like a resource. Very few people ever take a lesson and then never revisit that pro for at least a tune-up or another lesson to build upon what they do. I always look at the club fitting like, okay, this is session 1 of our journey together with you and your equipment. We're going to do this together, whether it's online, if it's a traveling customer, or if it's a local customer, we're going to have the luxury of spending more time one-on-one. But we never want it to be a one and done, because we have to evolve together. You know, we're all changing. We may make a swing change. We may have a subtle preference for trying to, maybe you hit a draw, but you found that your miss is on the left side, so you actually want to turn that the other way to protect yourself. Okay, well, let's reconfigure the loft and lies to allow you to do that. I think that's a good idea. We'll talk about it. Make it more of a relationship moving forward, rather than, okay, here's your clubs, off you go. See you in 5 years when you need a new set. I would probably not do it if that was the way that it was done. I just don't think it's susceptible to producing good results.
Well, no, as you say, it's an ongoing relationship. Our games, our bodies, our games develop over time. People work on their swings. So you say we've got the amount of people that have come. Actually, one chap he's not been playing very long. He came in and we built a set with graphites. He was massively affected by dead weight of the club. So even a kind of a 5 or 6 gram grip change from what we were testing with to a slightly heavier mid-size really affected his timing. And he's now into he's 2-3 years down the line, really worked in his game into I think he was in an Acra 70i to start with. I think he's now in one of the sort of lighter end of the CT 115s because he's done so much work on his swing, and that in itself is, you say, it's great fun watching his journey through and watching the journey of the equipment. But of equipment through as well. But actually seeing this really tangible improvement. And it's a question one of the guys asked earlier was, what would you do if you've got someone who's making swing changes? How do you incorporate that into the fitting?
It depends on their level of consistency that they're able to achieve at the time. If they're able to replicate and see consistent sort of launch numbers, okay, we can deal with that, and then we can make sure that we work with you as the changes embed themselves. Tiger is obviously our benchmark with this type of thing, because he has evolved significantly in the swing, from Butch to Haney to Foley to Como to basically himself. His irons haven't changed on sort of the shaft, the length. It's always been the same. The loft and lies have always been different. The requirements for that, the way he leaned the shaft forward under Foley versus Haney was entirely different. And you heard he always talked about that hot ball flight when he first went to Foley, because Foley had him a little bit more closed club face. So he had to lean the shaft in order to keep the face neutral. That dynamically brought the loft down a little bit. He had to evolve in his specs, but he never changed the head style that he liked. The shaft that he liked was always X100. It was always the same length, but he needed different loft and lies on those 4 entirely different swings. So there's changes that are easy to make. I don't think people need to go the wholesale changes though that they think they do.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think from a swing change point of view, so most of the time it's a little bit of synchronization, unless someone's making a really major change, or if you've got a teenager who's growing, getting stronger, or then the other end of the scale as well. But generally speaking, a swing change is more a slight sequencing change and path delivery change. You're not going to change, your muscles fire a certain way, so you're not going to change how you generate your speed through just doing a small swing tweak. So actually, most of the time, it's a loft and irons. It's a loft and lie change. It can be more complicated when you get to the driver in particular, because if if there's a noticeable path change, then it'll affect the amount of loft you're going to deliver in order to keep the face online. And it can be a little, if someone's doing that, we'd often say, look, you know what, we can do the other bits, but settle in with it and then come back with the driver, because it's an expensive mistake if we can't adjust the head. The whole head style might change. And I think going on to one of the other bits of tech, I think now with the amount of different components that go into driver heads, wood heads, but driver heads in particular, the amount of difference in CG locations, I actually think it's getting harder. It was easier to predict what a head was going to do in the past, player to player to player. You had a much more consistent spin launch profile from heads, I think, in the past. But I think now, buying one off the rack now is a real minefield, because it's the CG position and its effect on the spin launch profile relative to how a player delivers it, I think is massively increased in the last couple of model changes, really, 2 to 3 maximum. But that side of knowing, you used to sort of see a bit of a flight profile and go, right, it's going to be one of these two heads. Whereas now it's a lot more complicated now, a lot more.
Yeah, I remember doing my TrackMan thesis on loft versus CG location, and at the time I think it was 2014, and I took a 12-degree SLDR versus a 9-degree ping G25 at the time, and basically shown that the CG location being so deep, so low and so deep on that G25 was actually outweighing the overall sort of ball flight of the static loft on the SLDR, because that CG was so far forward, and how basically the MOI was responsible for kind of stabilizing those hits. And at that point, I basically the conclusion to the thesis was, how is anyone ever supposed to buy a golf club off the rack?
Yeah, I mean, that one in particular, they panicked. See, when they found the pros needed 2 degrees more loft, they kind of went, the loft up campaign came out of it. And I mean, that's a very extreme version of it. But I think now, between the heads, I think the little nuances of angle of attack, the shaft lean, someone's sort of face rotation, face position through impact, they all have such an impact, I think, with the current heads in particular, driver heads on spin profile in particular. It's become far hard. I mean, the only way to know is dynamically in hand to know for certain what's going to work and how well.
We had a driver in our hands on Monday, Simon, the Big Bertha Alpha, the first one, the dark blue first one with the gravity core. And we had done like a video with Matt, just basically hitting an old Callaway versus his current fitted one. What's the differences? And we saw exactly what we thought we would see, which is on a great strike, nothing really in it. On a bit of a mishit, quite a lot in it. In actual, he had a Rombax 6. I think he had a 6 Z07 or something like that. The old yellow one. I think that's what it was. And so shaft was too soft for how fast he swings it. And it was a good video for us, because we were able to show that for Matt, when he gets a shaft that's too soft, he leaves the face wide open, which is completely counter to what most people think a soft shaft does. Everyone thinks it accelerates too much, shuts the face down, and it becomes a hook machine. It was time after time after time when he missed it, it was open face, because the club was just never could catch up. So we got a lot of requests following on from that video to, well, how about you take that old head and you fit it? Take a shaft from current lineup and really dial in the specs, because it had heel and toe weight, it had the OptiFit sleeve, and it also had the vertical gravity core. So I thought, it's a brilliant idea, let's get in amongst that one and fit it. So we've got the gravity core weight down, we've got we're working through some different shafts, pretty good. Then all of a sudden, Matt started hitting it 3, 4, 5 millimeters above the center of the center of the head, and he starts hitting these things, dive right down. And so we find the shaft that he likes. We flip the gravity core, and we found that on an identical strike vertically, there was 900 RPMs of difference when we flipped that gravity core around, based on adjusting that CG up and down the head. 900 is the difference between being completely out of, optimal performance and being fully in that optimal range. It was an eye-opener for us.
Yeah, and almost. I mean, he says the head was always. It was always a solid head. He said, I think it's the cross-face performance now which is so good. And it's like you did the test between a kind of a blade and a game improvement iron, and the drop off in performance off centre on the blade versus I think it was a G400 you were using in that test. I think it was something like 7 miles an hour difference in ball speed, and I think now with the current crop of heads, with the level of detail and the quality of construction, the quality of materials, the general MOI of the heads, the level of drop off now off centre is so much better than it used to be, and that's I think there's a distance kind of chat about distance at the moment, but I think the heads facilitate players using their speed so much now because you can get away with it. And like Matt finds with the well, it's out there, so I can say the Maverick because he's using that because that's now known in public. Is that heel strikes we've seen to be really good ball speed wise with those, very good ball speed wise, and so certain heads just perform a little bit better in different bits of the head for different delivery styles, and often that's the little key, the consistency of ball speed and flight profile that just marks one head out from the other.
And I think one thing that, again, forgiveness and ball speed retention, I think forgiveness is undefined in our industry. What is forgiveness and what does it mean? Well, it means different things to different people. But ultimately for me, it's your ability to retain your launch conditions as close to what you would be on a well hit shot. So that might be launch speed, spin, and obviously shape. And the head has evolved so much on off-center strikes. Like you say, you can take a CPO2 from Titleist, the concept. A really small head, very thin top line, thin sole, kind of hit that toe and heel. It's still pretty damn good because the way that head's been constructed. So it plays like a game improvement iron, but in a really small package. So technology has really evolved from that perspective. But I think where people are still missing a significant amount of performance is how does that club retain its energy in and out the strike. I think not enough people are talking about the sole design and the club's ability to retain that speed and energy. So the shallow player, how much forgiveness they need on the lead edge of the club versus the steep player who needs the forgiveness a little bit further back on the sole of the club. I heard a lot of people saying, with the Strixon sole, with the V sole, well, if you tend to struggle a little bit with the club entering the ground early, that V sole is really good for improving your turf conditions. Well, it's actually the complete opposite. It's really good when your low point is 4 or 5 inches out in front of the golf ball, and it's great for getting the club back out the turf in an energy efficient fashion. The reality is that V-sole doesn't work until the middle of the sole is in the ground. Whereas if you take like a T100 or a P760 with a pre-worn leading edge, that's the one that's going to buy you that fraction of time and space in order to preserve enough energy to get a really good strike. If you are the shallow player whose entry point is a lot closer to the golf ball. So again, there needs to be a little bit of an education process for the average golfer who's buying clubs just off the rack, so that they know these things in order to not make a bad decision.
But I guess this is stuff that we've been able to kind of get our teeth into, probably because we're now able to focus on that bit, because we've now the level of detail and information on the rest of it is now there, and so we're not having to focus so much on that stuff. We can go more into the minutiae of how do we really kind of know then. So something like the Strixon irons have always been great for a little bit lower spin. If you get the player who kind of, we've generally seen kind of squeeze it out but generate a lot of backspin, the 785s in particular have just been a fabulous head for taking 400 or 500 revs of spin off. And the other aspect, the fact that we can now focus on soul grind for amateur golfers is I guess testament for how good the rest of the kit's got. And one question that came through earlier was how, actually, well, I'll tie it into this. Once, how important is the ball during a fitting? And then opinion on game-changing pieces of equipment in the last 20 years, heads or shafts. I don't know whether that's because of, is it club heads or is it shafts, but I think ball-wise in the fit, how important is ball in the fit?
So the golf ball for me is the biggest blind spot currently in club fitting, because you may go to a driving range and they'll fit you to your numbers. Oh, look how good your spin rate is, and you have to look at, well, with what ball are you achieving a good spin rate? Because the range of launch and spin rates throughout the golf balls is, from what I can figure out, there's about a 4-degree range in launch angle, and there's about a 2,000 RPM difference in spin between the highest and the lowest spin in golf balls.
Are you including that Mizuno ball in that?
I mean, that thing's wild.
Yeah. One of our fitters, Tom, he's been really low spin. He said, apart from the fact that it lasts a shot, because the cover rips, he said he's a bit of like a. I don't think he'd feel too. He's watching. I don't think he'd feel too bad about it. Saying he plays a fairly strong draw, or has done. But he said it gave him 1,000 revs of spin over anything else. But don't go to bunker.
I know. Well, the downside of it is, though, is part of, again, the ongoing education side that we found with it is, you do gain the spin, but you do lose the launch. So ultimately, the apex isn't improved because the additional friction is actually pulling the golf ball down slightly rather than having it go up slightly. So, in that case, we've actually found there are other golf balls. If you're in, is it Tom? The lad who's, so if you're like in a Tom scenario, probably the 2020 Pro V1X or the Bridgestone Tour VXS are probably golf balls that would have a slightly firmer core, so they get the launch. A lot of that is purely compression to get the launch, but the cover is really, really good in order to retain the spin. So, the Mizuno golf ball is great if you have high launch, high spin. Not great if you have mid launch, low spin, because it will tend to pull the launch too low. So I carry about 10 golf balls in my fitting drawer, so that if working off of a base ball, which for us is the Srixon Z-Star XV, that's our standard ball in the bay. If I see that you're not kind of where I need you to be, I'll go grab one of those other 10, whether it's a TP5, 5X, Pro V, Pro VX, AVX, one of those I'll go to for sure, because the golf ball ultimately is the way we're going to round off the fit with going, okay, this is how we've really dialed in your numbers.
As you say, you can get great consistency of flight and ball speed, but you don't really want to change the loft or any of the composition of the club. But so you can use the ball to just hit that window of flight that suits. Maybe to different for. Well, Canada's massive, so it's going to be for different parts of the Canada versus like links golf here versus playing on a soft parkland course, playing in wind. Some players will switch between a TP5, 5X, for example, because of the 500-600 revs of difference out of them, even though it launches higher with a 5X. You can use that as the kind of the if you need to, the final piece of the jigsaw to kind of just make sure everything hits the right window.
I mean, it's a Dave Brailsford thing, isn't it? It's your marginal gains. And as fitters, we have to use those marginal gains in order to really complete the process. It's never one thing. It's never, how do you fix being low spin? Well, let me give you 5 things rather than one thing, because if I give you 5, they will compound in order to really make a difference. Let's not just try and do it one way. Let's not try and go to a shaft that's a little softer in the tip section, or just I'm dead against people wasting their money on things that are not really going to work.
Because they won't do it consistently enough. It's I'm trying a couple of other bits. One chap said, if it's true I put my ball in the freezer, they'll go further.
I mean we were shocked with that one when we done that. We put one golf ball in boiling water from the kettle, left it in there for 15 minutes, put another golf ball, exactly the same golf ball, it was TP5. We put it in the fridge at 3 degrees, and then we took them both out at the same time and hit them, and we saw an 8-mile-an-hour ball speed difference. We're thinking it was going to be the hot golf ball that would sort of, be a little bit softer and high energy and really release, and it basically turned it to mush.
Yeah.
So the overcompression of the golf ball led to way less speed, and the firmer golf ball went miles.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the old put your ball in your pocket in winter to make it go further. But I guess it's the compression thing. I think it's seen at high speeds, the whole my golf spy doing the soft is slow kind of thing. But I guess the more if it over compresses, it's losing energy through compression. So it's a bit like putter shafts. You get the most efficiency on balls with the stiffer the shaft, the better the energy transfer. In putting in particular, but it's a similar principle to that.
Definitely.
But it's as you say, if you over compress something, it's far worse than under compressing it.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's a bit of an open tagline that slow is or soft is slow, because really we're only talking about drivers.
Yeah.
With regards to iron play, there's the presentation of loft is a significant influence, obviously, in the compression. These most significant in influence in the compression. So we have actually found the softer compression golf balls go a little bit further off the irons. We don't find it to be a 1-to-1 ratio all the way through the bag. So we've seen scenarios where we think some people may generate a little bit better performance because more of their clubs benefit than are affected adversely. So if you lose a few miles an hour ball speed with the driver, well, it's probably worth it to pick up a little bit at the other end of the bag where you love the soft feel with the wedges and things like that. So it's not golf ball choice is not about speed. It's not purely about, okay, here's the fastest one, off you go. It's got to be a well-rounded recommendation based on feel and performance, and it's got to be from putter all the way back. Putter, wedges, irons, hybrid, fairway, driver, and make sure you're not basing it off of how far the ball goes.
So you say with part of that distance gain with the softer core, would you generally see that be a bit lower spin? Part of that with the softer core, would you generally see part of that distance gain being a bit less spin, or not necessarily?
Definitely.
I mean, that's certainly what I would tend to have felt. But
absolutely, Simon. We do see that. I mean, when people try to think about it, I just go, I always use the basketball analogy over here, but football. If we pump up that football, right, and get it really, really firm, and then we deflate a football, and we basically bounce the two of them off the ground, well, which one is going to rebound higher? The inflated one, the firmer one, is going to rebound higher. There is no amount of softer compression that makes it rebound faster. It just doesn't work that way. Energy isn't stored and then re-released at a higher rate because something is softer. So, understanding compression that way, people are like, okay, that makes sense, because all we're doing is the ground is being tilted at an angle, and that's what obviously we're talking about as loft. And so it's a complicated one, but the whole soft is slow is just one element of that.
Yeah, it's a nice tagline, isn't it?
It's a slow dash ER. It's slower. It's not faster. It is slower. But that doesn't mean it's worse.
So I had one chap, Seb, who's asked a question a couple of times. What do we think about a graphite design BB7X in an M6? And I know that Ian's answer will be the same as mine. If it's the right one for you, it's great. But if it's not,
Seb,
it's a stinker.
I've seen Seb ask that question on our lives and Insta Live. That question has been going out. Seb,
it's a great head and a great shaft.
They're going to be good if it suits you, but it's so difficult when we both have the wall of shafts at our disposal and heads at our disposal that we do. All we can say is that yes, it's a good combination if that's the right one for you, but we can't give you more than that.
So I think there's a question. Actually, one very brief, because it'll be a question. Robert, well, I'll try and pronounce that. Robert, I'm going to call him. He's going to be rusty, having not played for so long. Should I do another club fitting? If you've had one fairly recently or in the not too distant past, then it potentially makes sense to go, as long as you're happy with the results of that, go back to that same person and see how it compares. They've got that data to compare with, and you can see comparatively where you were, where you are, and make a decision about whether anything else needs to be done from there. But depending on how long it's been since you played, it might also be worthwhile just making sure that you're swinging a little bit and have at least hit some balls to get a swing going a little bit before going straight into a fit. So that would be my advice.
I concur with that 1000%. Make sure you are no longer rusty by the time you go for that session, because obviously the rusty element is you don't quite have your timing down. You never really want to be going in there to second guess your equipment based on, well, is it me? Is it the equipment? Is it the fact that I've not been playing an awful lot? So, make sure you see from your flight what you kind of expect to see. Those are always the best times to do testing. Is when you're swinging it well.
Couple of Chris, we'll go on to actually. There's a couple of questions on putting. There's one quick one about Aidan Kemp just asked difference between pured shafts and not pured shafts. And puring is a technology for anyone who doesn't know puring. It's been around pushing 20 years now, and its basis obviously is finding the most stable plane in a shaft to install it into the head. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't alter the structure of the shaft. All it does is, the analogy is it's like bouncing a car wheel. If you've got the right shaft for you in a head that performs well, what puring does is it allows you to install it in a location that stabilizes, in principle, stabilizes impact as much as possible, because the shaft will recover back towards, if it has a best plane in it, it will recover and back towards that plane more consistently. So it's like bouncing wheels on a car. If it's the right shaft, it'll perform well. If it's pured, it gives it the best chance of performing consistently for you. So pured to not pured, it in principle tightens up dispersion and tightens up spin profile just a touch.
And I think in terms of when we look at shafts and how they deflect as well, I think that there may be a day come when we have more information on what is the best orientation. So if you understand where the biggest decrease in performance, the problem I guess with golf is the golf club is not moving on a plane; it's moving on multiple planes. So, and that's not to say puring will identify weaknesses in a shaft. It will sort of limit the effect of those weaknesses, and I think the day will come when we're able to install the shaft on the most effective plane for that player, whether that's via the droop, whether that's in sort of the deflection sort of towards the target. So I think that the day will come when we actually have more information how to use that process more effectively.
And to answer Aidan, we do as a matter of course for all the shafts that we install. There are some very, very lightweight ones that we don't want to break, so we don't, because when they go in the machine, granted there's a lightweight, a thin wall shaft setting where you can just hand tighten, but there have been over the years a few crushed lightweight shafts by the machine. So the really light ones we do err away from, but it's something we do for all the clubs we build. So putting's the other bit. I mean, I think you talk about the ball being a kind of a big kind of almost a black hole in terms of there's so much to be done with that, but I think putting's an interesting one. I think we use the Capto system. I use Quintec, and when we installed upstairs, we didn't want to do putting until we could do it in the same way we do the rest of the bag. So, but when we put that in, we use the Capto system, which is it's a small unit that goes on the putter itself, easily transferable between putters, and gives a lot of information regarding the movement of the putter. There's some great 3D graphics that you can use. Partly also it's for starting out with it's good cost effectiveness actually in terms of for what it gives versus pounds per performance. We certainly didn't want to invest a huge amount in putting and then find we weren't doing any putter fits. But actually Capto's been as we've learnt it better and like any system, you learn it and you use it more efficiently over time. It allows you to display the information well, and it's very practical. But I think putter fitting, it's one where I think putters are the hardest one to get long-term performance improvements for. I think it's less exact than the rest of the bag. The rest of the bag is very easy to say you're launching it too low, too high, too much spin, too little spin, and we can improve that. Putters have a lot of there's emotion attached to them as much as data as well. So I always think your putter fitting is almost sort of complex to a point, because you've got so many different shot types. Can someone read a green? Are they aligning it right? Do the visuals of the putter suit their eyes? Do they, their depth perception? How's their stroke work? And actually getting real guaranteed performance improvements can sometimes be really tough with putters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, experience in putter fitting is absolutely crucial. It would be very easy to give someone a putter fitting that looked great on the putting platform, and actually didn't translate at all to the real world if you weren't in good understanding of the principles around what makes a putter functional. There's a big difference between being optimal and functional in putting. One of the first tests that we do is we establish what your aim tendencies are, because if we were to put you right on Quintic, aim you at the hole, and tell you that all you do is shut the face all the time, we need to get that face to slow down in rotation. We have to change the way you deliver the putter. Well, if that player aims the putter 2 inches right at the hole every time, the amount of face closure could be the one thing that makes them a good putter. And by stopping that face rotation, unless you change the alignment with it, you completely destabilize their ability to putt well and their perception. So,
have you been watching my stroke?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, talking to the guys at Ping in the R&D they've done, they said even the best players in the world do not aim on target every single time. So knowing alignment tendencies and people, how people react to the target is the key to matching up with the correct face angle.
And as you say there, the face angle is king with putting. Where the face is pointing at impact is king. There was a question about gear effect on putters with the that came through earlier on. I think unless your face to path is a good few degrees off, would always prioritise getting the face returning back to target line. I mean, look at Billy Mayfair, who putted with a whacking great cutter. His practice stroke was beautiful, but then he cut right across it. And he did pretty well. But I think it's granted, the more perfect your stroke is, in theory, under pressure, it's less likely to break down. However, for most amateurs, getting consistent face angle to target at impact, that's got to be priority number one. And then if they can aim it where they want it to go, or alongside aiming it where they want it to go, then even better. Whereas if you can't aim it and you compensate for that aim, and the head style doesn't improve your aim, then so you've got to take that route.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the things I love about Quintic is the ability to measure the journey of the putter and the subsequent result. And that's the one thing that Quintic does incredibly well. Quintic ball roll and being able to sort of manipulate the result, I think, is the real strength and value in that system. But like anything else, like any technology that we talked about with Foresight versus TrackMan, how you apply it is the art form of the fitting. So for me, I know that when we get people on the platform, I know that if you are rotating the putter more than 4 degrees within a 6-inch space pre and post impact, you're going to have a really hard time timing that club face. If I can get you into a putter where you decrease that rate of rotation and we match up your face impact within a degree either side of 0, I'm going to give you the best opportunity to perform well in the money zone, which is inside 8 feet. The stats of how many putts that are the best players in the world make inside 8 feet, which startle people. I think people walk away from a putter fit going, I'm still not making those 20 footers. No one does.
Well, you only see the winner, the leaders on tour in the tour events who are putting really well, which is why they're at the top of the leaderboard that week. So you just assume that they all hold 6-footers the whole time, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I think Mark Brody released a great stat on Andrew Rice's lockdown learning series recently. Is that in a 72-hole stroke play event, the average amount of putts hold over 20 feet is 2. two putts over 20 feet in a 72-hole event for the best players in the world.
Well, that puts it into perspective. Yeah. That's I didn't realise it was that low. I would have. Wow. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Staggering stat. Actually, Elliot followed up about the MOI thing, saying it was about vertical gear effective pitching launch spin. I guess if you're striking it high or low on the face, you're probably going to more just inflict your distance control, which then affects your reading, which then affects everything else putting.
100%.
It's not like a driver face where you've got a roll on the face where you've got higher loft, lower loft. They tend to be basically flat face. So you're not going to get a high launch, low spin off the top part of the face. But low will spin it a little bit more. But
Bobby Grace putters have radial face, so they're like
the old teardrop ones. They were going back some.
That's right, and obviously the sick putters have a change in loft as they go. But from a vertical gear effect standpoint, the bigger thing to worry about is CG location putters. If you take a mallet with 3 degrees and a blade with 3 degrees, the launch characteristics are entirely different on those particular putters. So if you're the handle dragger, someone who kind of has the forward press and drags the handle a little bit, decrease the loft, something with the CG further back is really good for that type of player. Stops the ball skidding, increases launch. But if you're somebody who delivers it with a little bit more dynamic loft, keeping that CG closer to the face is actually much, much better for that player. So I think most people think of loft as the determining factor for creates a little bit of launch on the golf ball, but to be honest, CG is as effective, if not more so.
It's thinking about it the same way you would the rest of the bag. It's the same. It's the same physics, isn't it? It's the thing that we found with some of the with the spiders. I mean, they're a great, very popular putter, but actually, the amount of the gearing around the hosel from that style with the short neck with the spider, the more you move the weight away from the shaft and go kind of a deeper head with a short neck, actually you get some, as you start your through sink, can really open the face up. I've seen quite a lot of fits where with the spiders you get and sort of a bit of an inside track on the way back and then a block. Because it just it drops it, almost sort of drops it in behind on the start of the downswing and never recovers.
That's
so contrary to belief, it's going to catapult it over.
Yeah, I mean, people look at putters and go, well, a face balance putter is for someone who has a straight back, straight through stroke. Well, that doesn't exist. And then a player who has a putter with toe hang is looking for the club face to accelerate and close faster. Well, that also doesn't happen. If that was the case, why would we put weight in the toe of a driver to stop the face rotating? It's the same principle. If the head has more mass toe side of the shaft axis, then obviously in transition, as you change direction, the point at which the face actually starts to open increases. So if I'm trying to decrease the rate of rotation, I'm more likely shaft axis, and that's
just you lost me for a moment. We had a phone call come through. That's why I use the short neck. I use the short neck because I've always had a bit of an over close, so I actually use it to help me leave it a little bit more open. And say reason I streaky short game is I'm very right-handed, so I kind of recognise I have good days and bad days from pace control, but actually to give my you get a bit more feel for the putter face, or I feel I get a bit more feel for the putter face, but it just lets me time the squaring of the face a little bit more naturally rather than having to hold it off. I can hit through the line a little bit more. So I think one of the other questions through earlier on, and Harry Bradshaw, I will come back to your question because I know you've asked that a couple of times. There's the boy Slater. He sent in a question yesterday. He said, got a strong arc for putting, so why does a face balanced putter feel the most stable? And the answer really that is it depends how you're creating that arc and what you're doing with the face and those dynamics as to how stable that putter stays relative to your plane and arc and how, let's go back like the gears with the full swing, how much your hands rotate. All those go together into the melting pot to determine whether a face balanced putter works well for you, whether you're strong arc or not, and how you create that release point, that squaring. And ultimately say that you did a podcast with the guys from Ping. Was it Paul? Paul you did with Ping? Was saying that they're doing something trying to work out what it is that makes a certain player style putt consistently well with a certain style of putter. And that's going to be a long study, but it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's always baffled me, Simon, when I look at the best players in the world, and I always use Justin Rose as an example. I'm shocked that he, from week to week, will go from using a face balance putter to something that is on the extreme of that, and go, how can you be so polar opposite in terms of what you need week to week? It's never really kind of made sense, especially when he has the guys that he has at his disposal, like David Orr, and David's is massively knowledgeable, but those putters are so conflicting in what they do dynamically. I just almost don't. It goes back to something that Kim Braley said to me in a podcast last week, was even the guys on tour are not getting as good of a sort of a service, if you like, as what Precision or TXG or True Spec or Cool Clubs are offering our clients. Because how many people are on a PGA Tour being working with Quintic or Capto or Sam? Very few.
Yeah, I think, and that's a big misconception in for the consumer, is that the guys like Rory or Tiger, that they will have non-standard equipment made for them, and they are getting looked after that way. But actually, most of them, we've worked with. We did an Instagram with Monty a couple of weeks back, and we've worked with him since 2007. And yes, he's been looked after well by all the companies. But what tends to happen on tour, and certainly the tour vans historically were repair centres for grips and for regling a shaft breaks, you have a repair, and they'd walk down the range going, "Don't touch it; it's still drying." And the pros they used to get 7 or 8 drivers thrown at them to try and find the one that worked best, because none of them were built the same. So they picked out 2 because the 2 were probably just more suited to them of what they were given, rather than it being, this is definitely set up right for you. And it has improved since then, but there's not going to be the same layers of analysis as to root cause. Right, why is that best?
I mean, some of the players that I work with who are playing sort of PGA Tour level golf, there's a gulf in the sort of the service that they receive, and that's trying not to throw anyone in particular under the bus. No. But it's just the facts that if you are Rory McIlroy, John Ram, DJ, Tiger, in that crew of the round table advisory guys, you're going to get everything you need. Keith Sabarbro will be there to travel with you. So he'll go to to Medalist, Floridian, wherever you need him to be. Your stuff will be perfect. Trotty and Wade will do what they do, world class, doesn't get better. There are guys that are maybe just picked up a tour card though, or languishing 124th on the money list, and they're not really getting the same. They're not getting the same treatment across all companies. So I can see where there's frustrations, and that's, I'm sure, a lot of the guys you work with on European Tour or Challenge Tour or whatever, you're a way better resource to them than anyone. Because you offer that real premium level of service.
That and as you say, and the fact that it's not that they don't, when they get their service, they get a great service, but it's also, I guess, the attention to detail, the ability to spend the time with them. Because if they've booked in to see us, then actually most of the time they're paying us to come and see us as well. So they've got us for 3-4 hours and got our 100% attention. They haven't got a load of other guys who they've got to deal with, or they've got to spend their time with the top guys and need to get the other guys out of the way. Whereas we can spend the time on it, and I guess that's part of the difference as well.
Yeah.
Aidan asked, actually, have you guys done any testing with the new truss putters?
Yeah, we have. We've done a decent amount. We were out of the Kingdom for the launch of the product, and we were with Dwayne Anderson and done some testing with him, and he was a big part of the development of that. And I think there's good value to stabilising the face that much. I think
it makes sense, which is a good start point.
It makes sense. Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. One thing I will say though is from a stability standpoint, when people leave our studio, and we've worked through a series of 20, 25 putts, call it. By the end of it, the amount of twist that we see in the face is so minimal.
Yeah.
By the time you're fitted, that might actually be something that you don't necessarily need. I would say if you mishit your putts and you're just not going to go for a fit, that's probably a great putter for you, great option. But in terms of the stability and how much we see from that face twist, by the end of the session, they're pretty dialed in from that perspective. Yeah,
because if you've done the other bits right, they should be fine in the middle of the face a little more consistently. Loft and lie and balance and head style.
For sure.
Yeah,
I think a big part of that as well is, Simon, is understanding that where the CG placement is on that putter. It isn't always where we think it is. Often it's slightly more heel side of centre. Because of the weight of the hosel, there's very few companies. I mean, Even Roll is one of the few companies who changes the weight of the bumper on the toe and the heel in order to offset CG. Not a lot of companies are paying full attention to that. So, some people who hit the ball in the middle of the symmetrical centre of that putter isn't always the CG of that putter. Often that's a little bit more heel side, and even if you hit it dead centre, you'll still get a little bit of that twisting of the face open because the CG is a little inside the centre.
Yeah, because when I did a treat to self, because I turned a certain age this year, and
21 was it?
Again, plus. But the putter that I wanted to be the best one for me, actually kind of hosel style still worked well, but actually I ended up going with I got a really great custom Bettinardi done, and for those that know me, I got a peacock feather on the bottom, not filled in or anything, but because I wear bright clothes and I show off a bit. But it was interesting how it was that slight change in CG location between the two heads, just quality of contact and that was really the only determining factor. It just got a better balance of strike regularly, and it can be just that little difference that marks one head style. They can be almost identical, but in the construction of the head and the way, like for example, where the mass is milled in the Bettinardi, whether it's the weight of the hosel, this is just changes the strike point, the CG location to suit where you regularly contact the head.
Definitely. All those things that, again, your people will be scratching their head going, wow, I didn't know there was that much to putters and putter fitting. I kind of just thought it was a case of find a style you like, roll a few putts with it, and if you can hit it pretty close to your intended line, then that's surely what you're looking for. There's just so much more to it than that. When you're able to see a golf ball at ground level and see the launch and the spin and how the ball's reacting relative to the delivery, it's an eye-opener, because from the bird's eye view looking down, we can't see that. Yeah. So you need to be on the ground level looking at the golf ball's reaction.
So I'm going to get a couple of questions in, because seeing as we're coming up to 2 hours, people probably, I'm really grateful for everyone who stayed online with us. It's been great. You felt we've been interesting enough to watch, but I figured 2 hours is probably enough of your time. Harry Bradshaw need to answer his question. He said, for scratch handicaps, what sort of iron launch characteristics should you have for link score for hard greens and wind? It's one of those kind of almost so slightly difficult questions, because downwind you want a bit of spin to get a bit of control coming into the greens. Into wind you don't want as much spin. So really, we would probably fit, if anything, maybe a slightly lower flight based on someone's natural game being, if they're playing all the golf on the links, then you don't want a moonball. But equally speaking, there's no point compromising one. You still want a balanced performance from the club and from the setup, because otherwise you're just cutting off your nose to spite your face. So in pretty much any situation, you're looking for the most neutral performance you can, because then that allows you at your kind of level, assuming you're a scratch player, at your level you can then control what the ball then does, rather than have to fight one element of the performance. Yeah, great downwind, awful into wind kind of thing. That's something we just don't ever want. So neutral, especially if you're a elite level player, a good level player, neutral always best.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree with that more. Yeah, links is a unique one, and the requirements are definitely a little bit different in the links. Yeah. Remember talking to Ed Robertson up at St Andrews about some studies he done with regards to ball flight in their specific area in St Andrews, and I was shocked what he found was sort of an optimal launch conditions for driver. And he said that based on hitting into the wind, downwind, crosswinds, 10.9 degrees of launch was the optimal launch angle for what they found, which is obviously way less than what people try to achieve nowadays. It's normally kind of 13 to 15, because that's what allows you to hit it a little bit further and that sort of thing. But into the wind or downwind, trying to be neutral in that environment is a completely unique environment.
Yeah, but great fun.
Absolutely, definitely. And then golf ball becomes massively important. At that point, I think two golf balls are phenomenal in the wind and in more neutral conditions. Again, go back to Pro V1X and the Bridgestone Tour BX. Those two golf balls are such a well-rounded balance of great aerodynamics, great on distance, but still give you the green side spin. Those two are high performers in all conditions.
Because that's actually one thing that surprised me. I played TP5 for a little while now, was having come from, I used to play Pro VX and the spin was starting to get up. I actually used to find it felt a bit firm at that point.
Yeah.
And then the amount of shots when I switched over that I would hit in a crosswind at the edge of a green and the thing didn't move.
Yeah.
And you start to go, that's going to be great. And it's in the greenside bunker because it hasn't budged. I was amazed at how straight it and how unaffected by the wind it was. But as you say, those things really can make a difference. We'll cover sort of one other. Tom was asking, your swing speed increase, is it lessons with Larry C and speed sticks, or is there anything else?
I think lessons has helped, no doubt about it. I certainly deliver it a little better than I did a couple of years ago. I don't think speed sticks has been something I've committed to enough in order to really see the full value of it. I have trouble. I have some neck issues that kind of don't allow me to swing fast for a large period of time, which has kind of been a real pain in the backside, because I really wanted to go through a full course of the super speed train, but I really end up struggling with it. I think it comes down to sequence, having your swing sequenced correctly. So I think the 3D guys, the guys who can measure your swing in the kinematic sequence of it, I think those guys are going to be significantly sought after over the next coming years, because I think that's where the real speed lies.
We've got 39 seconds left, so we're going to have to wrap this one up. It would be great to do some kind of, if we can manage it, whether it's with TrackMan and GCs, it would be quite fun to do some comparison, whether we can do some joint stuff online. But we'll put our heads together and see if we can do a bit more moving forward, because this is great fun.
We'll love to do anything like that with you guys for sure, Simon. We'd love to.
Ian, thank you so much for your time. It's been great catching up. Hope you guys stay safe, stay well, and get back to it very soon. But thanks again.
To you and James and the families.
We'll wrap up. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Ian.